Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We are your hosts, Kristen and Karan. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
And today on our podcast, we are talking with Ashley Mays. Ashley is a sex, love, and communication coach, and she helps men and women get over their sex hangups and relationship breakdowns to have even better sex and more fulfilling relationships. She is also the co-founder of Wild Awakened Women, an online community aimed at helping women awaken their power, strengthen their confidence, and embrace their sexuality and love their shadow. Welcome, Ashley. You are such a pirate.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here and to connect with y'all and just talk about pirate shit.
All the best stuff.
Edit that one out. the bleep.
So, Ashley, you and we have a special relationship where you're one of the first people that began guiding me on my pirate journey. And you've been by my side during stormy seas, celebrating with me through smooth waters. And I've learned and grown so much with you by my side. So I would love for you to take our listeners on a journey of what led you to becoming a pirate.
I mean, there's the big story and the short story. I'll go try to do somewhat in between. But like Kristen had shared, like her and I have known each other for a few years, couple of years. And we met at a common retreat that maybe some of the listeners know about, Training Camp for the Soul. I was one of the facilitators there. I did a lot of the integration side of things. And that plays into a lot of, I did the typical thing as a woman. I went to school, I met a boy, fell in love, got married, and then that's when we actually started doing a little different, as far as we started a business. We started a CrossFit gym. I was laid off from that job and or a job that I had, and I started to really put myself into this business that my ex-husband now was creating. And looking back now, a lot of it was I sacrificed, I gave, I did all these things. I lost who I was, my vision, my goal for myself, because I thought, oh, this is what you do in a relationship. You do, your dreams are their dreams, and there is that, there is you have these shared vision and shared core values. But what I ended up doing was losing a whole sense of myself, and my life became his. We started these other different businesses and all of that. And then, we started, and really a lot of it is, I think of my previous marriage as my spiritual awakening. Because the life that we were going into had us step into this, awareness of, I'm in control of these things, these emotions, and how can I navigate that? And there was a lot of that happened in all of that, and it continued me not listening to my intuition, and sacrificing myself in that relationship to a point where we kept on doing this growth stuff, and our communication actually during all of that became so much better. We learned how to communicate. We were talking about our emotions and feelings that were coming up, and experiencing them. And then when it came down to at the end, a lot of her patterns that we had in our relationship we kept on playing in those and we couldn't step out of it. So for us, our decision was to completely separate and to dissolve that marriage so that he could be him and himself and not have to come to me to help him to make it happen, and for me to rise and do my own thing without having to depend on him. And so that really, all of that, I started talking to couples and people about communicating, learning how to express our emotions and our feelings. And then post, divorce, separation is really when I started talking about more sex and having that conversation with people, not just couples, but just people in general, because our society has made sex be this taboo thing. Our education around it is, don't have sex until you're married, or, oh, if you do, here's a condom. And there's actually no education around it. And then as couples, we have these desires, and there's the scary part about actually sharing that. And so really that's how started really being more of a pirate, if you want to say, as far as like, I want to talk about these things that are uncommon or taboo.
Mhm. Damn it, I love what you said about that, because I mean, I personally, I went to Catholic school. I got my sex education from nuns. Okay. So I remember in sex ed in like grade 7, being 12, whatever, about that age. And my sex ed, I made a poster that said, "Pet your cat, not your date." And that's what I recall from my sex ed from the nuns in Catholic school. And so it really, that's just how we brought up. And my parents did my mom, I would say my mom did a good job in teaching me what's going on with puberty and what is happening with my body. And yet there really was that the all the message that I got from, schooling was, sex is bad, sex is wrong, don't do it until you're married, and then you just have lots of kids.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
good Catholic girl way.
Yeah. Then you do all this and then you reproduce, and that's what it's supposed to be, but you actually don't communicate how you're feeling. Oh, and then then you get stuck into this like mundane way of being in a relationship. And there's so many different avenues that we can actually choose in a relationship of how we want to operate. Do we want to have kids or not? And then when we have kids, how does that actually operate in our system? How can we have them be a part of our life versus being all of our life?
Mhm. Yeah, that's all beautiful too. Like being able to bring that in, have that conversation. And well, I had this question for later, but I want to ask it now since we're talking about sex education. Part of your rebellion that you want to do is bringing better sex education into schools. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So this is funny. I was actually having a conversation with my brother last night, and a lot of it is, I mean, like, Catholic. I grew up Baptist. My dad's a preacher. I almost went to like, you're Mormon, but I think that's just Mark calling Adam
Yeah, I
calling me
wasn't
that.
Mormon.
And I was like, wait, no, you had like a very religious
Mhm.
upbringing, and so there is this lack of education, because it is uncomfortable to talk about, and it also, like, the conversation impacts everyone in the family involved, mom and dad, and then the school system. And so, but mom and dad don't always teach it. They rely on the school system.
Mhm.
And then the school system is like, oh, I'm going to rely on mom and dad having this conversation. So there's actually ends up being very little and lack of a conversation. And a lot of what I want to do, is just having the conversation around it, bringing it up to where sex is a part of life. We we're all here because of sex, right? And there's so much more that we can do around it. Sex isn't just, like reproducing. Like that's a lot of what we're taught. Oh, you have sex, you get married, and then you have sex, and then you have kids. And yes, and there's so much more that can be had around that. And so like bringing it into the school system, because that might be a little bit more of a conversation to have later, but allowing it to be a part of the conversation, allowing children to know and understand, even adults understanding their anatomy, how it works, how it operates, what's the function, right? Going into like understanding us as women, our cycles, how that operates in our relationships for ourselves, and how to talk about it, and how to like learn to listen. It has to do with our intuition too, right? It's like learning to listen, and then teaching, men as well, little boys, about their anatomy and how to have the conversation, and how it operates, and the responsibility of both parties, men and women, little boys, little girls, of connecting with each other, and then teaching both of them to like know what boundaries are. This is mine to touch. Going to mom and dad too, because sometimes that can play into some trauma in our upbringing. But it was like, this is my anatomy, this is what it is, you can touch it, or you can't. It's for me to touch. And then even going into really talking about the actual anatomy. It's called a vagina. And here's when it can be appropriate to touch and not appropriate to touch. It's called a penis. Here's when you can touch it, and here's when it's appropriate not to touch it, like not, I remember growing up, I was learning my anatomy, and I was like, oh, this feels good. And I'm like leaning up against a couch, and I'm like, oh, this feels good. And my mom came in and she saw me, and her reaction was, oh my goodness, Ashley, no, go to your room. I was shamed, like, and not putting the, I was shamed for that. And so then that created my own story of like, well, if I touch myself, this is bad, this is naughty. And so it's more about just educating and learning, like, here is your anatomy. It's gonna feel okay, it's gonna feel good, you're learning it. And the more you can tap into it, here's what it's called, and this and that, here's when you can do this, here's when it's, not appropriate. It actually allows us to create so much more self-awareness, and our boundaries and our values and all these things can come from it, and we have better relationships with ourselves and with other people.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because even the work that I do primarily with women in terms of like health and nutrition is really around like menstrual cycles. And I'm often surprised each time when even women, we don't understand the anatomy, the hormones, the cycles that we live into, and it's so important to educate. And I'm educating, grown women about their cycles that we didn't learn in school or from our parents or from anybody, right? And so you're taking that one step further, or maybe a few steps further, teaching women about their anatomy and their cycles and what everything means as well as men. And I think that's, or boys and girls, and I think it's so important because we can be so ignorant about our own bodies and what's going on. It shouldn't be a like mystical thing. Like it is magical, but yet it shouldn't be hidden and secretive. And I love that you're bringing that out to the open.
Yeah, I love that too. It's like we're such magical pirates of human beings, right? And the more we can tap into our own pirateness, our own mystical, our own magical, the more that we can give into the world, um, and and the gifts that we give. And it's just it's beautiful, and it's learning too. Like this was something I realized as I started coaching more of this was, I had this thought that, oh, everyone's the same. Everyone's vagina looks like mine. Oh, everyone's menstrual cycle is similar to what I experience. And the more I started diving into it, I realized, oh, it's all different. We all have different anatomy. And so the more that I can learn my anatomy, the more I can communicate how to operate in the the external world too.
Mhm.
The more I learn my internal world, the more I can connect to the external too and communicate it. And so that was a part of it too, is like learning, like there's different ways that our vagina looks. There's different, penises and shapes and sizes, and it's all beautiful.
Mhm.
And then it's learning how to operate those systems, right? And to be in self-discovery of learning what I like, what I don't like, and then learning how to communicate that with partners, so going from like the children, like just teaching them about like their own anatomy, and then that's going to evolve into when they come more adults and they're learning and they're connecting with people. um, they can say yes to moments, and they also know how to say no to moments, and that's the same as adults. It's like the more we learn and operate our inner system, we can say yes and no.
Mhm. And so, with the work that you're doing, um, what does it mean for you to be a pirate in this realm of how you're working?
Yeah, so I think y'all described it in the intro, is it is to rebel, right?
Mm.
Be different. And sometimes rebellious, we can create, especially if you're, my hair is doing weird things. um, especially in the religious world, rebellion is considered bad.
Mm.
And really, I look at rebellious being an expression. It's really like this, like, I'm outside of the norm. And that's what being, to me as a pirate is really, let's talk about the things. And for me, I love talking about sex. Like, I want to have the conversation and making it being something that is in the school system.
Mm.
It's in relationships, it's in friendships, it is a common conversation, just like, what's your favorite type of food?
Mm.
Yeah.
And Ashley has been called a dirty old man by the that she makes and the things that she'll say. So.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, yeah. I'm going to call him out. Adam Chen. Adam Chen has called me like a dirty old man, and I'm like, you're right. If I have an opportunity to take anything in that direction, I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to make some jokes about it. And it's a lot of like lightening up, because
Mhm.
sometimes, and I think that's a part of being pirate too, there can be some serious things, right? There's these conversations, these topics, these things that are like uncomfortable, and it's about, how can I make talking about sex be more playful? How can I make it more fun and be silly with it, because it is a part of our life. And so, like, making it light to where that can bring into having conversations with your partner a little bit of easier, right? Having those conversations with your children a little easier.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and part of being more pirate is learning to be more comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And really leaning into that and having those conversations and like you said, making something that's serious and has been taboo for so long and making it playful and fun. Like that's what a great way to get the message across and to share your rebellion. And so would you say your social rebellion is really about opening up the communication about sex, or what is your social rebellion?
Yes, I would say that is it's talking about it, like really opening up, like you said, that communication of letting it be a part of our life.
Mm.
And it goes back into, we are all here because of sex. Why are we fighting this conversation? And so it's like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the uncomfortable. And it's okay, and I think a lot of times with couples and relationships, our stories that we have created, our upbringing holds us back in so many ways. And so when we can start talking about it in our relationships, it opens the dynamic of talking more about our desires, our fantasies, and just speaking into them and giving permission for them to be talked about.
Mm.
Whether or not they're act on is one thing, right? Like a lot of times it's just like, oh, I have this, fantasy of having a threesome. Oh, cool. What does that look like? And like we don't always have faces or this and that, but it's just a fantasy. And so then speaking into that allows like, oh, well, actually, I have a fantasy of, you spanking me with a spatula.
Mm.
Oh, well, that sounds fun. Maybe we can do that, right? And
Mhm.
so like it starts like adding the opportunity to spice up things in our life too. It breaks that mundane and creates the ability to like bring in new things and talk about it, and creating boundaries and learning like, what am I comfortable with? Well, what is actually the story I'm creating around it?
Mhm.
You know, do I want it, or is this the story that I'm saying it's bad? Actually, I want it. Okay, cool. How can we create a container? And then that's a part of it too, is creating a container of allowing couples to play and explore into those areas that can be uncomfortable.
Mm. And how do you coach people to start setting up those containers or start having those conversations?
Yes. So I think one is just literally like starting to talk a little bit more about sex. I think sex toys are amazing. And it's so I would say in a relationship, it's more of, hey, you know what? Something I'd like to really do is create like a time. I mean, I feel like in both relationships, being like a man or a woman, like coming to it, if I had a partner that came was like, I want to have more sex. Cool. And you know what? I'm thinking, let's set up a container that we can play and explore in. And
Mm.
so really it's helping, having that conversation of like, okay, what does that look like? And that's I like calling it exploration or sexploration.
Mm.
I got that from my sex coach mentor, and it's really creating this container where it's a space to play and explore and bring in um, our wants, our desires. And there's other things that you can do, right? So there's self exploration and discovery. I typically tell couples to take the erotic blueprint, which I think is like I call it the sex love languages, right? So they're going to learn their own sexual desires. And then I have a will, won't list that I got from my mentor, that I have couples to go through and to like look at, like, here's the things that I'm yes to, here's the things that I'm a no to, and here's the things that I'm a maybe to.
Mm.
And that just starts allowing the conversation, right? It's
Mhm.
opening it up. And then it is scheduling in that time of like, okay, well, let's take one of these over here, take one of these over here, and let's try it out. And that container is this space of like, oh, there can be those awkward moments, like maybe you accidentally fart. Like
Yeah.
maybe there's things that happen in our body system, but it's in a container where it feels safe, and it's like, I see you, I accept this is okay. You can giggle and laugh about
Mm.
it, and then you just get to continue to connect.
Yeah. So you mentioned like schedule that in. So is that something that you like would coach couples to do? So actually schedule in like their sex exploration or their time alone, their intimate time, rather than trying to wait on spontaneity, especially when you have
um
a house full of kids.
yes. Right. So to me, I think of it as a both and. um I think a lot of times in relationships, we can go into like, oh, well, they'll initiate or she'll initiate, like, there's that. And so the benefit of scheduling can actually be, this is our container to connect. And having kids and this and that, that's when you plan to like have them go to bed, have them go to a babysitter, like whatever that looks like, you get to navigate that in your relationship. But having that time is actually the container for you as a couple to connect with each other and spend intimate time. And sometimes it's even sometimes allowing, like, it doesn't have to be about sex, right? We think about it, as our society, that sex is like, there's an outcome, there's an orgasm. And really, to me, I look at, like, how can you connect as human beings being in a relationship and creating more intimacy? So taking away even the sex part of like an orgasm, and just like, maybe it's just sitting on a couch and making out. Maybe that is scheduling. Like, I love having couples schedule in, like, bringing in new things into the relationship. I think that's one container. But I think there's a beautiful part of, like, in a relationship, knowing that you have this part where you get to really connect with each other. And a lot of times too, they're like, well, having a schedule can be mundane and it can get boring. And there's so many ways that you can play into that, as far as, you knowing, okay, I'm going to have sex, or I'm going to connect with my partner on Tuesday at 1:40 in the afternoon. And you know what? In the morning beforehand, I'm gonna text a sexy picture of me, here, or I'm gonna send a text being like, I can't wait for you to touch me. Right? Or like, oh, I'm thinking about, your hard cock. Like, there's so many things that we can do to play into making what can seem boring and mundane into that time. And that brings up this, intensity, and it's more playfulness in a relationship.
Yeah, it gives you a chance to have that anticipation and
Mhm.
build it up. Like, ooh, I know what's happening at 1:40 today. I can't wait.
I'm about to get thrown on the bed. Yeah.
And how do you advise the people that you coach or that you work with? How do you make it safe to ask for what you want, or even just to initiate, having, okay, I want to have like sex tonight, or can we do this, whatever that's going to be, in a way that's safe and kind of protects the person doing the asking from rejection. You know what I mean? I can imagine. I'm lucky enough, I don't think my partner's ever rejected me in any way, shape, or form. But I can imagine that, just that act of, even if someone's just not feeling it for that night, on the other person on the other side, how do we protect ourselves from feeling rejected or having that stories of rejection when really your partner is just had a shitty day and isn't into it today?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what you're saying, it's giving permission to speak into it. So, going into a relationship, I can be like, hey, how you feeling? Like, I can go into like wanting to have and initiate. And this happened a lot in my previous, marriage. Was I would initiate, and then they weren't feeling into it. He wasn't feeling into it. And then for me, I made it about me. Right. And so looking at, like, when that happens, because it can, like, we're all not on the same thing, and I think that's part of the playfulness of scheduling it too, is because you're actually creating the container to, like, be in it, and giving permission that, like, life happens. And sometimes you got to shift things, and sometimes you're not, like, but creating that container and agreement around it. But looking at, like, when I would get rejected, I made it about me. Something's wrong with me. Oh, I'm not enough. Going into those, like, childhood wounds and limiting beliefs, and really what I could have done, and what I try to help is like, oh, okay, fine. Like, we don't have to. That doesn't make or break things in the relationship. What's coming up for you? What are you experiencing right now?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to connect? And maybe that is just sitting and laying together in bed, or sitting on the couch and just having a conversation. And to me, that can be way better than actually having the physical side of intercourse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is intimacy. That is into me, you see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is those things. And so sometimes when we say no, or we're rejected, it's also an opportunity to, like, how can I, okay, so this isn't this, like, it's not about me. It's actually, how can I connect with my partner even more? How
Mm-hmm.
can I be this space for them to talk to? What's coming up? And maybe they don't want to talk about it, and that's okay. And it's like, okay, cool. Thank you for honoring your space. And you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to go watch some Netflix, or I'm going to go and I'm going to make some dinner. It's like giving that permission of them to be like, it's okay to say no sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And with all of this, like, it took you a process to get to this point here. You've gone through, you were married for a while. Yeah, it's been a journey. You grew up, we've had conversations. We've grown up similarly, where sex wasn't talked about. So what small, bold actions have you been taking to get you to where you are today?
I like this question. I think a lot of it is being curious about my own sexuality, my own sensuality, allowing myself to be curious about me, because once I learn more about me, then I can communicate it to my partners, whatever the dynamic of the relationship is. I think self masturbation is one of the most beautiful practices that men and women can have. We can learn about how we operate, the things that we like and don't like, bringing in, sex toys and starting to introduce those to myself. And then, like, having it as like conversation with a partner, as like, it's it's not that you're lacking in anything. This is an enhancement. This is a playful thing, right? And so just like slowly playing those little pieces together. But I think, the biggest thing for myself is just learning my own anatomy, what I like, and allowing myself to have a masturbation practice.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, with that as well, you are part of Wild Awakened Women, and that also is a big rebellion in a sense of working with women. Will you tell us more about that instead of me trying to explain
I
it?
love it. Yes, thank you. Yes, and so a lot of Wild Awakened Women, which is with my business partner Lindsay. We've both gone through some similar life experiences. We were married. We were doing this like traditional thing, and then, her story, my story, similar and different, but basically we ended up in a divorce. And a lot of it was this disconnect of our intuition, tapping into who we are as women. And the way that we both, different timing in our lives, but the way that we both did that was through dancing. We started, and it's funny, we both did pole dancing. And we started going to pole classes and learning to, like, oh, let me tap into this expression of like being a woman, and it's okay to like feel sexy and to move. And for me, similar to her, but for me, the more I tapped into that, the more expressed I felt too. And so really a lot of Wild Awaken Women is about, let's tap into who you are as this woman, and we get to rebel on all these stories of I have to be a good little girl. Oh, you know, don't say anything nice if you can't say anything at all. Right? Like all these things that we have been taught and put down, from generations to generations, right? It's ancestral. It's like, no, what do you want to do? And how do you want to express yourself? Let's look into these parts of us that we actually are scared of, that's going into that shadow, those things that come up, that's having the difficult conversations, that's bringing into, like, it's giving permission of being so sovereign into who you are as a woman that it becomes wild.
Yeah. Wild woman.
You just never know what you're gonna get. And it's fun and it's playful and all of that. Like there can be so much deep work into it. And also at the same time, it can be very fun and playful to learn more about who you are. And that's really what it is. Learn more about yourself, have fun and play, right? Connect with people,
So I mean, wild woman really is the pirate woman, right? And so what does being a wild woman mean to you? Like, what does that mean?
To me, a wild woman is knowing who she is, connecting so deeply to who she is, and expressing that in a way that creates this like little ripple, subtle disturbance wave, to where as it goes further out, it has this huge or bigger impact, and then it gets to come back, and then it continues, right? It's like this, like, I'm here, I know who I am, I'm stable in this pole, and I'm going to do a little wave and impact all these other things. I'm going to disrupt here and there. I'm going to do some things that are different and uncommon, but I'm also at the same time, I'm going to bring people back in to connect and to help them do the same for themselves, because it's all going to look different for, us as humans. And so it's really just giving permission for people, men and women, especially for women, for me, but it's like giving permission to be different.
Yeah, it's interesting. We haven't shared this story yet, but this podcast was almost named Running with Wolves because of the book, Running with Wolves, right? Women Who Run the Wolves. And I know from even just your Instagram that book has had a huge impact on your life as it has in my own life. And I was wondering if you would just share a few thoughts about that book and how that may have influenced, wild awakening women.
It's so crazy. Sometimes when there's those little moments where you're like connecting the dots and it's like, oh my goodness. So I downloaded the book on my iPad, Women Who Run with the Wolves, a few years ago. And I started reading it and just like, happens with books. Sometimes it's like the timing isn't right and correct. It was, after I met Lindsay, my business partner, she was like, Ashley, this book. And I was like, you know what? I've had this book. She was like, read it. And I was like, okay, I will read it, and then, it's so funny too, because as we started our Wild Awaken Women actually was originally, it evolved in a lot of ways, but originally became, when we started, it was a connection of helping women connect back to who they are post-divorce. And then it's evolved since then of being just like helping women connect to who they are, in all aspects of relationships. But for us, it originally started in that divorce, and she was like, this book really like helped me through, and let's do a book club. And so I was like, all right, cool. Well, I'm doing a book club in a group, might as well read the book. And I struggled actually. And this is something I share too with people that I recommend it with, is, the first couple of chapters are like, it's deep, it's a lot. Get through the first couple of chapters, because since then I like that book, and it's so crazy because what I'm going through in my life, I go and read that book and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many parallels that are happening. And I don't even know. But the essence of what I really love about it is, and you know this too, both of you, is it's the life, death, life cycle.
Yes.
It is, we have life, and then something dies, and then there is a new creation from it. And it is the cycle. And it just gives so many different ways of looking at it. And I skipped ahead because we're doing a rage retreat, in later this month. But like there's sections about rage, right? And it's giving permission to be able to, and this is part of it, being pirate and all of that, is like, these are our emotions, this is our human experience, these aren't bad things. It's learning to sit and be with it, and not necessarily like try to navigate around it, but it's how can I sit with it, and how can I learn from it, and then use it and grow with it. Because anger, rage, you know sadness, hurt, all of this stuff is going to come into our lives all the time. And I just think that book is such a huge teacher in how to be the most expressive woman for yourself.
Yeah, the first time same thing. I had that book and I started reading it, and you're right, the timing wasn't right. And I went through a rough period with my health and with some loss in my life. And my partner and I went to Mexico, and I was sitting by the pool, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try reading this. And man, there was one story that I read, and I'm sitting by the pool in Mexico at a resort, just bawling my eyes out, like just tears streaming down my face. And that was the right moment for me. I needed that story. And it really was about that life, death, and life cycle that really hit me, and really had a huge impact on me in that moment. Then I'm like, okay, now I see what everyone's talking about. And then, I devoured that book, and multiple times it still lives on my nightstand, right next to my bed, because you never know when there's, like you said, when something comes up for you in life and you're like, I'm going to reread that chapter and that story, because it just seems so poignant and so timely that I need a refresher in my mind.
I need this thing. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. Like, I mean, I have a conversation with Lindsay about it. I'm like, I'm fucking reading this chapter, and this is all this that's happening right now. I'm like, oh my gosh. And she's like, I told you so. It's like, she's like, I told you. And that's like, I think to me, that's the beauty of like a book that has so much love and intent of helping women like ourselves really being them. And it's a book of like, when you need me, you can come to me as a resource.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm really interested, and I've seen some of your posts and you mentioned it. I'm really interested to hear more about this rage retreat, because I mean, that sounds super pirate. Like, most people go to a retreat to like, oh, we're going to have a calming, nice, let's all talk about positivity and happiness. So tell me about this rage retreat. It sounds amazing.
Yes, I'm so excited. And so is Lindsay. And a lot of it, so the root of what it came from, we were having a group call, and it was, we had a divorce group call. And so it was women who were going through a divorce. Um, and we were just having a conversation, and she realized like, there's a lot of anger in women, and I think just in general as humans, we have this rage. And so really that came from the conversation that we had on this group call, and she was like, let's do a rage retreat that allows women to release this emotion that could be so stuck and that could be really scary about. And then from that, we do call it a rage retreat. It is focused on anger, and it's also about all the other emotions.
Mm.
And so it's about meeting the emotion. And this is a big part of, like, you've read the book, both of you have read the book, Women Who Run with Wolves. Is it's about meeting the emotion and being with it and learning and learning from it, and then how can I move forward. And so the rage retreat is, we're in the middle of the woods, nowhere, I don't know, Oregon. Kristen, you may know where it's at. I don't know where it's at.
Southern Oregon. I don't know.
Yeah. It's this little small cabin. We have no running water, so we actually have to bring our own water. It's a porterhouse, like the porterhouse. That's not right. Porta potty. There we go.
Outhouse.
Outhouse. Yes,
Yeah.
there we go. There's an outhouse.
I think porterhouse is a steak.
Oh yeah. I'm hungry. So
also should bring those.
Bring some steaks, right? It has electricity, so it has, like, it's glamping. But then it's in the middle of the woods. Cell service, it's not there, right? So there's no cell service. It's meadows. There's also this lava rock, and the idea is, like, really to strip away these distractions, these things that we can be so connected with, and allowing ourselves to just be, to feel. We're creating some experiences to, like, tap into it, but it's feeling and being in nature. We're gonna have, like, some fire ceremonies. We're gonna throw shit. We're gonna scream. We're gonna dance. Like, there's so many things that we have in there, but really the essence of it is sitting with those feelings and being with them, and then learning how to use them and move them. And we call it rage because, that's a fun name, but it's also sadness, that comes apart, of our rage. It's hurt, it's pain, it's all these things that we've slowly let our, like we call it a, cut by 1,000 whatever, it's like this, like, moments of, like, oh, I didn't speak into that, oh, I allowed this to be okay, oh, I did this, oh, I did this. And so it's like being in those. And we have an exercise that we're going to go through your lifetime. And when were those moments, and you may know this in the book, this was the idea, it's taking those moments of, like, when did I not do this? When did I let things be okay? When did I not speak into this? And it's like taking those moments and just being like, oh, thank you for the lessons you taught me. And also, I'm really angry, I'm really sad. And so, yeah. So the rage is just, a good time.
I love that. I feel like as women, especially, we're taught not to feel our rage or anger. And even just working with some of my clients, I often suggest car screaming. I discovered screaming in my car.
Yes,
and I
love that.
I'm like, just as you're driving, you have no passengers. I'm like, be warned, the people in the car next to you will hear you. Don't give a fuck about it. And I remember discovering that. I don't even know where I heard about it, but the first time I was frustrated and I was angry, and I started screaming in my car, and I screamed and screamed, and I screamed for so long I had no voice left. And it was such a powerful, like, thing to go through, because I hadn't expressed my anger and rage that way before. So I man, I can't wait for these borders to open up and your next Rage Retreat. I am
I
there,
love
or we're
it.
going to bring it to Canada because
Mm.
Kristen and I joke that as Canadians, we put all our rage into the Canadian geese. But I think we need to start feeling some of that rage ourselves and expressing it. So we're going to bring that Rage Retreat to all of these nice, polite Canadians up here.
Yes. And I mean, that's really, like this is our first retreat, and we see this as being really our signature thing that we do, because it is giving permission. Like sometimes those, and it's really like there's different ways to release all these emotions, and it's a navigation of like, here's what can work, here's what can work, here's what can work, right? I love, like I have done the whole car and screaming in it, and it is amazing.
Yes. If you're
It's so
listening right now and you're angry about anything, hit pause on the podcast, go scream in your car. You'll feel great. Come back and catch
so
the
good.
end of this. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, even buckle yourself up, get ready, and it's so fun to like, bang on the steering wheel, put on some rage music, like put on some music, crank it up, just scream, and it feels so good. Make sure you're parked on all that stuff. And if you want to scream while you're driving, just, be safe.
Do it at the red lights. That's what I like to do.
Sure.
Pedestrians walking by and you're like, ah.
They're like, wait, what's happening?
Do you have a favorite? She's pirate. Do you have a favorite song to rage to?
I'm like, let me look at my song list, because
I'll tell you mine. I definitely have a favorite. It's Closer by 9 Inch Nails. Great song to rage to, also great song to have sex to. So take it as you will.
Go both ways.
I'm taking notes.
Take notes.
Yeah, I'm like, oh man. It's so funny. Like I go into, when I want to rage, I go into like more like sadder songs. And one that I just discovered the other day is Not Okay Not to Be Okay. Is by Marshmello and some other little artists with them. But it was like, it's okay not to be okay. I'm fucking mad. So it's like there's a lot of times where like sometimes I'll typically go into more like sad songs or like slower songs, and I'm like, I'm sad, but then I'm also like, no, I'm angry. And now I want to hit things and be all this, so yeah.
Awesome. Well, where can our listeners go to find out more about you and about Wild Awaken Women and your Rage Retreat? Where's a great place for them to go?
Yeah, so Instagram is our, my main area. So for me, it's ashley.d.mays on Instagram. And then with Wild Awaken Women, it's wild_awakened_women. There's a lot of, cross sharing and all that in that. But yeah, I do more of like my own journey and communication stuff and relationship. And then Wild Awaken Women is more about tapping into that feminine power. Still comes into mine too. And so it plays into a big, communication contribution side of things.
Cool.
Now the most important question of all is, do you know any good pirate jokes?
I knew that was coming up, and when I did the the interview scheduling, I had to look it up. This one's really good. I thought it was really good, and I'm bringing it back up. The question, the joke is, how do pirates know they are?
How?
They think, therefore they are.
Oh man. The best thing about pirate jokes is they are always corny.
It's so, I was like, I read that, I was like, this is the best. I'm putting this one in there and I'm remembering. Yeah. It's like, no matter what, you're like, wow, that was bad. And I'm gonna laugh anyways. It's very, so this isn't a pirate joke, but this is another joke. And it's one of those ones where it's like a sympathy laugh. And it's like, what does one crazy person say to another crazy person?
What?
Well, hold on. I messed that one up. I actually, now that I said it, I'm like, oh, I messed that up. What does one crazy person say to another crazy person when they have to go to the bathroom?
What?
Do you want a peanut?
Oh my God.
So bad.
That's terrible.
The best part is you messed it up. So
I know the fact that I messed up the whole part makes it better. But yeah, so that's my go-to joke actually. And now I have a pirate joke to go to.
Yes. Awesome. Well, this has been awesome, Ashley. It's been so good talking to you and finding out all the stuff that's going on with you and what you're bringing to the world. So yeah, I want to thank you for coming on our show and thanks.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for what y'all are doing too, and like just getting these fun things out into the world, this like pirate rebellious, like playful life.
Yeah. Totally awesome. Well, thank you very much, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye. Let me